Okay, with that, let's get started. Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm Cheryl from TYHO, also known as TYHO. So thank you for attending our first Ask Me Anything webinar today. And joining me here are my colleague Gowry and our therapist Fion, who will lead today's session. So a little bit more about our platform before we start. TYHO is an end-to-end therapy platform that provides accessible, convenient, and quality mental health support. So as part of our third year celebrations, we thought to launch this AMA series to build and give back to our TYHO community. In addition, we hope to provide everyone with an opportunity to learn more about commonly faced mental health issues and speak with a therapist outside of a session. Today, we'll be covering the common causes of low self-esteem and negative self-talk. Okay, so just a couple of notes before we start. The session will begin with a 10-minute presentation by Fion, followed by a 35-minute Q&A session. To post your questions, you can click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen anytime. Feel free to do so anonymously. You can also use the chat button to interact with one another or send a message to us if you're facing any technical issues. Lastly, at the end of the session, we'll be sharing a feedback form with you. Okay, so now let me introduce Fion, our speaker for today. First of all, Fion is a therapist at TYHO, and some of you may have seen her profile on our website. So as a professional counselor, she supports individuals of various ages in coping with their challenges. These include emotional distress, relationship issues, and of course, low self-esteem. Fion has lived in multiple countries and held several leadership positions in the past. As such, she's no stranger to the difficulties that come with adjusting to new cultures and environments. Without further ado, I'll now pass the time on to her to share with us more about self-esteem. Okay, on to you, Fion.
Hi, everyone. So thank you, Cheryl, for your introduction earlier on. And hi, everyone, I'm Fion, and I'm really glad that you're here today. So today, we would like to share with you on self-esteem from a counseling perspective. So low self-esteem is one of the most common reasons that brought clients into counseling. So in fact, it is the top issue that TYHO clients are faced with. And from our data, more than 50% of our clients wanted us to help them boost their lack of self-esteem and explore with them ways to build their confidence. And what is really interesting is that there are many clients that came in to seek support for a separate issue, say work, relationship, and it almost always emerged in our sessions that the underlying issues that they face with is their low self-esteem. And with the prevalence of low self-esteem impacting on our daily life functioning, it really prompted us to holding this webinar today. So we'll be covering these points for our webinar today. We'll first take a look at the symptoms of low self-esteem and how would low self-esteem look like in our daily life functionings. And next, we'll try to understand what causes low self-esteem. And lastly, we want to look at ways to help raise our self-esteem and boost confidence. So before we delve any deeper, let's start with understanding what is self-esteem. So self-esteem refers to our opinion of ourselves, or you can say as the overall evaluation of our self-worth or self-value as a person. And self-esteem looks different for everyone. So it is subjective according to our own abilities, our personality traits, characteristics, beliefs, our experiences, social interactions, and cultural values. So our experiences can influence the health of our self-esteem. So for example, positive experiences such as achievements, recognition, can support and boost our self-esteem, while negative experiences such as constant failures, extreme criticism, and rejection can lower it. So low self-esteem happens when we place little values on ourselves, and those can manifest into different symptoms, leaving us feeling unhappy or unsatisfied most of the time. So let's now go through the common symptoms that we might experience when we have low self-esteem. So perhaps we could observe ourselves engaging in negative self-talk, speaking to ourselves really discouraging, using words like stupid, ugly, or no one loves me, or statements like, what is wrong with me? I can't believe I made that mistake. I'll never be good enough to get the job. I'm such a burden. And as you can hear, being really critical and harsh towards ourselves. And when we have low self-esteem, we can tend to downplay or ignore our positive qualities. Like for example, when our bosses were to compliment our work, we choose not to believe in him or her, or we find it too difficult to do that, or we believe that luck plays a large part in our achievements. And we might also find it hard to set boundaries as we are afraid to lose the love and approvals of others. And we could also be displaying instances of self-doubt and self-blame. So a person with low self-esteem really tend to judge ourselves to be inferior to our peers. So for example, despite nailing that promotion, we still feel like we are constantly underachieving. And this could lead us to compare ourselves endlessly to others and still feel that we are not as competent or as knowledgeable as our colleagues. So we end up feeling like we are worthless, others are so much better than we are. And then we develop this need to push ourselves harder to be the best, to make up for these feelings of inadequacy. So you might be interested to know and say, hey, so what causes low self-esteem? So we understand that self-esteem is often developed when our unique personality traits, our values, our beliefs, interacting with our various environment, so including our childhood experiences, social relationships, surrounding cultures, and all this interaction helps shape the opinions of ourselves. So self-esteem may be impacted in our formative years, when our caregivers are extremely critical, demanding, unable to accept mistakes, when they are non-validating or supportive to our needs. Poor performances in school and lack of achievements in other parts of our lives could also result in lowering our self-esteem. And low self-esteem can also be caused by our beliefs and worth interacting with present circumstances. So we could be undergoing stressful life events such as loss of our job, relationship breakdown, and losing a job can be a major blow to our self-esteem, as it can make us feel that we are no longer valued or needed by our employer or society at large. And going through a breakup or divorce can lead to feelings of rejection and inadequacy, which of course would negatively impact our self-esteem. And also a toxic environment at work or at home where we are frequently being put down, being judged, gaslighted, or even abused could seriously impair the way we look at ourselves, despite it not being our fault. And ongoing medical problems such as maybe chronic pain, serious illnesses, and mental health concerns, maybe such as anxiety or depression, can reinforce our unhealthy beliefs about ourselves and in turn lowering our self-esteem. So how do we break free from our negative self-talk and limiting beliefs to overcome our low self-esteem and boost our confidence? So on these two slides, I'm going to share with you two skills that can be really helpful to do that. So as we have seen earlier on, repeatedly saying negative things to ourselves can result in low self-confidence, unhelpful behaviors, and pessimistic thinking patterns that could affect all aspects of our lives. However, when we learn to talk to ourselves gently and positively, we are acknowledging our own worth and value as individuals. So it is proven in science that talking to ourselves gently and positively can improve our self-esteem and also help us feel more confident in our abilities and accomplishments, and helping us build thriving relationships with others and allowing us to develop empowering ideas of who we are. And you might ask, how do we go about doing that? Just a little trick over here, treat yourself as you would your best friend. And how do we do that? So first, ask yourself, what would you tell your best friend if they were in a similar situation or when they face a similar problem? Would you say, you dummy, how come you cannot do better? You're such a burden to everyone. Or will you observe yourself saying that, I'm so sorry that happened to you. It must be so hard. You have done all you can. Of course you're not stupid. And then ask yourself, how would you empathize with them when they share the problem with you? Will you be harsh and dismissive and say you deserved it? Or will you choose to be supportive, to be kind and understanding and say, let's not be so hard on yourself when we make a mistake? And notice, how would your body language be like? Will you be rolling your eyes, signing in disbelief, getting all judgy? Or will you be embracing and gentle to your friend, telling him or her that you'll be there for them? So our best friend is our best friend for a reason, and they will not choose to stick around if they do not love everything about us, and vice versa. So when we learn to show ourselves the same kind of care, the same kind of kindness that we are showing our best friends, we then can truly learn to love ourselves, and then our confidence will follow after. So next thing, the next tip that we can do is to challenge our negative self-talk. So every time when we criticize ourselves, we tend to look for information that confirms our thoughts. So for example, our thought may be, colleague A is much better than me at work. I'm really bad. I do not deserve my role. And then we notice that we start paying attention to what colleague A is doing well and focus on our mistakes. So challenging our self-talk is really for us to stop and look for objective evidence that this criticism of us by ourselves is not true or true. And many times at the end of this exercise, we'll find that most of our negative self-talk is unfounded. And now I'm going to guide you on how we can do that. So first, when we notice we have all these thoughts, constant thoughts that we are not enough, we should have done better, and observe that we are feeling down and dejected, I would suggest that you take a pause first, maybe introduce movements to your body, say like moving away to get a drink, have a shower, take a walk, or you can also choose to take a few deep breaths. So all these movements and breaths can help us calm down so that we have more headspace to look at our thoughts and circumstances more objectively. And next, we'll try to understand what are these negative messages that we have been telling ourselves, and take a moment to recognize if these negative thoughts or messages are true or not. So using an earlier example, say colleague A is much better than me, so what we can do is we can just take a piece of paper over here. I'm sorry, if you can't see it, okay. Take a piece of paper, draw a line, divide the paper into two parts. So on the left side of the paper, write down evidences that colleague A is indeed doing much better than you at work. So put it all down, your observation. So on the right side of the paper, write down evidence that you are doing all right at work. Remembering the compliments that you receive from your bosses, perhaps, positive feedbacks from your colleagues or say clients, or scoring a big project in the past. And maybe you might also collect evidence that you have not done so well at work, like maybe some mistakes that you have made, some negative feedback, for example. So doing this visually on a piece of paper allows us to have a more balanced view on ourselves, rather than letting our thoughts go wild in our head. So after gathering all this evidence, we could most of the time establish a more realistic and a more neutral thought that colleague A is doing well, and we are not doing too bad either. And with a more neutral view on ourselves, our self-esteem and self-confidence can grow. And if you feel that you can't be objective enough, perhaps you are too emotionally overwhelmed, you can consider asking a trusted friend for their opinion, and they can help us think more positively and realistically. So do practice the shared suggestions wherever you can. You can also choose to keep a journal to chart your progress. So it does take effort and intention to replace unhelpful thoughts and behaviors with healthier versions. Be gentle with yourself and give yourself plenty of time to establish the new habits. All right, thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to answering your questions shortly. I'll pass the floor back to Sharon now.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, Fion. So before we start the Q&A segment, let me quickly go through our 3 ground rules. The first is to respect the floor, where we listen when others are speaking or sharing, even if we may be in disagreement. The second is to keep an open mind and welcome the different perspectives shared. And the last is to stay on point. Let's ask questions or start discussions that are relevant to the topic, especially in the interest of time. Also, you may send your questions in anonymously via chat, but if you prefer to speak up later, you can also raise your hand and we will unmute you. Do note that we would address you by the name you have indicated in this case. That's all I have. Feel free to ask away. Okay, so I see some questions already coming in. So first up, Fion, we have an attendee who is asked, how should we respond when we receive negative feedback or criticism, especially in a professional setting? Fion, you're muted. No problem.
Oops, thank you. So I think first of all, it's really challenging. It's tough to receive negative feedback phrase, especially at a professional work setting. So I would propose for us to first take care of ourselves. To stay calm, as mentioned before. Taking deep breaths, introducing movements to our body, and try our best to really listen carefully to what the other person is saying. And as much as hard as it could be, try not to take the feedback really personally. So instead, if we could shift our focus to on the areas that we can work on, we can improve, and approached it with a willingness to learn. I think this part is really important. So treating feedback as a learning process rather than a confirmation that we are not good, we are a failure, can help us remain objective. And you can also ask questions to clarify, add more details on what you can improve on. And at the end of the day, if you're ready, you have time, you can also reflect on what you can do to improve. And if you feel that it's too hard, if you still observe that you're trapped in this like negative thinking patterns, you might consider asking a trusted friend or other additional feedback from other sources, so to make sure that you can have a balanced view. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Fion. I mean, hearing from you, I agree that receiving feedback in a work setting can be very disheartening. So questioning the validity of it can, of course, help us distance ourselves a bit more. Yeah. Okay. So the next question that we have goes something like this: what are some ways we can challenge our inner voice when we go into a negative self-talk mode?
Okay, so as mentioned earlier, we can challenge our negative self-talk by looking for evidences, objective evidences to support or go against the negative message that we are telling ourselves. So that, first of all, could help us develop a more neutral and realistic view, and hopefully, will be helpful to stop our spiraling down. So another thing that we can understand is, if these negative messages that we have been telling ourselves, that we have been internalizing, do they come from negative friendships and relationship? And if this is true, the way we are talking to ourselves sounds like our boss talking to us, we can take a pause here and tell ourselves that this is our boss talking, that's not me. And then we can take some time to say, reevaluate our stance towards these individuals around us.
Okay, so we've touched a bit on critical inner voice, as well as a bit about receiving negative feedback at work. And now we have another question that touching a topic closer to our hearts, which is family. So the question goes like this: what advice would you give to someone who has low self-esteem stemming from family manipulation? So with that person still living with the destructive parent, it's difficult to overcome these negative thoughts with a constant source nearby.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely very, very difficult. Yeah, so a lot of times when we have low self-esteem, obviously perhaps impacted by our family environment, by our home environment, we might find it really hard to set boundaries, for fear of not getting the love and approvals for others. So perhaps we can try to first understand what setting of boundaries is not. So setting of boundaries is not us being selfish, it's not us being self-centered or aggressive, or we are trying to punish or manipulate, the other person. But it is really about us valuing our own needs and our well-being and communicating those needs and preferences in a very clear and respectful manner. And to learn, I think in a parent and child relationship, I think it's especially tough because of the power differential as well. So what is one immediate thing you can do is to do a little experiment, but perhaps with your peers or with your friends, a little bit, that relationship where you're a little bit more equal. All right. And the thing of the incidents that previously when you fight so hard, to exert your boundaries, and you find that you have to go along, despite your discomfort or stress. Okay, think about that time. And the next time when you find yourself in a similar situation, you try your best to give your honest reply and you observe the outcome. So maybe there will be some people who will really react negatively to you, especially if you are always the more accommodating one in the relationship, because you're not used to this dynamic. But do remind yourself that you're only responsible for your own actions. And just a reminder that starting with your friends because it's easier. So it's kind of breaking that goal of setting boundaries with your mom to a much smaller goal to start with setting boundaries with your friends. And as you practice a little bit more, when you achieve that, when you manage to set your boundaries and you don't see them like leaving you, when you don't see them, you see them accepting you, you can build more confidence and more mastering in this way. So when you have that confidence, then you might look at your relationship with your parents quite differently, and then you decide to take it from there. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Thank you so much for the insights, Fion. So since we are touching on about family, friends, and all that, I think it kind of relates to a person's immediate environment. And so we have another question that's a bit similar, but that deals more with like negative behaviors from people in our environment. So this is how it goes. Is it possible to build your self-esteem despite being stuck in an environment where people are engaging in behaviors such as gaslighting, insulting, or demeaning?
Yeah, I think it might be quite similar to the previous question as well, as again setting of boundaries. And so first of all, it sounded like you have quite a bit of awareness of what is going on, what is affecting your self-esteem, and awareness is often the first step to healing. So now that you kind of have identified your triggers, like it's the invalidating environment that you're in, I think that you have to ask yourself how comfortable you can do to set boundaries with all these people. That's one. And then you have that space and you have the time, you have the energy to work on yourself and to build skills, to understand and to build skills to improve your self-esteem.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions that touch on self-harm as well. And
Yeah.
I guess perhaps the attendee may be asking like why does sort of low self-esteem lead to self-harm? And a related question also goes something like that. What can we do about the self-harm that comes with low self-esteem? And what about non-physical self-harm that we inflict on ourselves, like staying in a toxic relationship? So two parts of the question. The first one touches on a physical self-harm, while the second one touches on non-physical self-harm.
Okay, sorry, just a moment. Okay, so I'll just take the first question first. So low self-esteem leading to self-harm, right? So I think, as mentioned, I think low self-esteem, I think it's quite similar to setting boundaries as well. We feel that we are not good enough constantly. And if you imagine that you're in that constant environment, keep telling that you're not feeling good enough, you're not feeling good enough, and you're in an environment where nobody really accept and validates your emotions. Or they say things, something like that when they ask you a question, when you want to share something with them, and they say like, what is wrong with you? So we really internalize that message as something is wrong with us, and we are so broken. So when we are trapped in this thought that, we see ourselves as somebody that is so broken, and we do not see the light at the end of the tunnel, or maybe because, we do not have the skills to try to lift ourselves out of that dark place. Self-harm is often the way, to help us cope with all these very intense and overwhelmed emotions that we have. And I'm really glad that you asked that question today. So I hope that explains to your understanding how low self-esteem can lead to self-harm. Yeah. So maybe Cheryl, so what's the second question?
It's related to non-physical self-harm, such as staying in a toxic relationship. So is that also tied to low self-esteem?
It could be. I think first of all, it could be one of the factors tied to low self-esteem. Another part is also, in a sense that, very low self-esteem, in a sense, most probably impacted by negative or very toxic environment. So we grew up, that's the only environment that we are familiar with, that we know when we are growing up. And for that person to recognize that they are in a toxic relationship, they might feel so familiar, so good. So if we talk about like the neurotransmitter, like dopamine, so when we put ourselves in a very similar situation, that kind of familiarity, we feel really comfortable, that dopamine is hitting, making us feel good. And our brain is sort of telling ourselves that we are good in this toxic relationship, even though it's toxic. So, but the thing is, when you ask this question, I guess you have some awareness that you are not in a very healthy relationship. So that's good for you. That's the first step for you to start seeking help. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question too.
Okay, thanks for your insights, Fion. So the next question that we have goes something like this. What is the difference between self-esteem and self-confidence? I've been told I have high self-esteem, but low confidence.
Okay, so I'm just going to put it over here. So high self-esteem and low confidence.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I guess it's quite interesting because self-esteem actually comes from a much bigger part, which is what we call a self-concept. So self-concept is made up of self-image, self-esteem, and also our ideal self in that sense. And all these three parts really add together. And if we have a very healthy view of how we see ourselves, our self-concept is solid. So we kind of have a high, good, healthy level of confidence. So now you're saying that when you have been commented that you have high self-esteem but low confidence. So self-esteem, I think, because we have so much domains in our lives. So you might have self-esteem because you're given a lot of practice, you have a lot of familiarity. So say, for example, performance in your work or in your school, because that's what, the kind of environment we grow up in. So we are quite good at our work and environment. So we feel quite confident on that because we place a high value of us doing, achieving good results, achieving good accomplishment. So in that part, we perhaps have high self-esteem. But maybe when you say you have low confidence, it could be towards socializing, it could be towards relationship, maybe because we haven't had so much practice before. So that's why we are not feeling that we do not place so much value of our worth in this part of our lives that resulted in us not feeling very confident. So, let me know if I'm answering you right, if I'm managed to answer your question over here.
Yeah, I think the distinction is certainly helpful because we often conflate the two, right? Self-esteem and self-confidence. Yeah. So now I'm trying to understand which areas we are confident in, and certain areas that we are not as confident in can be very helpful. Okay, so thank you for sharing that, Fion. And now we have another question that asks us if negative self-talk and low self-esteem can actually be addictive. So what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, negative self-talk and what is addictive again? I'm so sorry.
Low self-esteem.
And low self-esteem. I think there's a certain truth to it again, because it's something that we are so familiar with, it's something that we are so good at. Again, if we are looking at the dopamine part, so when we are doing something that we previously, what we have been doing all our lives, and we are like really good in that part, and to continue to dwell in, to get a lot of high sense of satisfaction from our negative self-talk and low self-esteem. Again, that's hitting the dopamine again, and that could really explain why we maintain. So even though we realize that it might not be so good for us, impacting our relationship or our work progress, but it's so easy for us to always fall back on all these unhealthy patterns that we have.
Okay, thank you so much. And then we have another question coming up. This one touches more on body weight, shape, as well as, physical appearances. Okay, so here is how it goes. What is your thought about self-esteem that is based on body weight/shape? I feel that I could be more confident if I am in a better shape, but some people do say you should love yourself regardless of what you look like. It felt so contradicting. How should I navigate this?
Okay, if you don't mind, if you just repeat the last sentence for me again. I'm so sorry.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so maybe we start with the first part first. So what is your thought about self-esteem that is based on body weight or shape? I feel that I could be more confident if I am in a better shape.
Better shape. Okay. I think in a sense that if we have not a so it's really interesting because there's this research that has been done that if for people who has this prone to feeling not so confident about body shape, it's really coming from low self-esteem. So conversely, if we look at the other way around, if we have a healthy level of self-esteem per se, that could protect us from easily feeling that we are not satisfied with our body. So explaining the relationship over here, and it's tough, with regards to learning to accept your body. And again, I think the big hindrance over here is our low self-esteem. So I think the first step that we can do is to really improve, is to shift our attention away from changing our body to changing the relationship with our body. So, what we encourage our clients to do in the therapy, the first thing is really to practice self-compassion. And you can start by writing a letter of gratitude to your body. List what you're thankful for when it comes to how your body works for you every day. That means focusing on the functions of your body. Like, for example, your abilities to breathe. Thank you that, my body is able to help me stay alive today. I can breathe the beautiful air, around me today, to laugh, to sing, to, play sports, to run, to dance. So focus on these functionings that our body can enable us to do rather than our looks. They can actually give us the permission to love and celebrate our body. And many people do find this a joyful, freeing and empowering process.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing that kind of changes the way I also perceive body as well as physical appearance. And I think in your answer, you also addressed the second part of their question.
Yeah.
Something like this. Yeah, I felt that I could be more confident if I'm in a better shape. But people say you should love yourself regardless of how you look. Yeah. So I think the part about shifting our attention actually, or like the change in mindset rather, can actually affect how we see things. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for that. And now we have another question that goes something like this. How can I avoid the symptom of low self-esteem, particularly the constant comparison to others and pushing ourselves harder? So I guess this question relates more about low self-esteem that is tied to being constantly compared with people around us.
Okay,
so maybe like the example you gave in your presentation, colleague A and colleague B. Yeah, so how do people actually avoid those?
I think the social comparison is especially tough. It's not easy, given like social media is like, looking, so first of all, we have to remind ourselves that everybody is like really humans. And in social media, there are a lot of people just showing us that, let's say 1 minute of their lives, and quite a lot of people, they are being paid to do so, to show all the good things in that part of their life. So that's one. So perhaps like monitoring, if you feel that, that kind of comparison comes from social media, monitoring and keeping be aware and be mindful, the comparison on social media and what they are doing to you right now. Be mindful of your emotions and your thoughts in this way. And you say using the earlier example that I gave, like colleague A and others, I think it's really is tough if we were to compare ourselves to others, because literally you might be an apple and the other person is an orange, and if you compare an orange and an apple, you can never get a really balanced kind of view. So what I usually suggest for my clients to do is to compare their progression. Like say, hey, how were you, like say 3 months ago? How was your mood? What were you doing? How was your behavior? Do you manage to sleep okay? And look at yourself today. So you managed to clock 8 hours of sleep, you managed to do some exercises, you managed to feel much better. Your mood is, say at 8 today. And I think that will be a much healthier comparison, like your own progress over time.
Thank you so much. I think that's a pro tip even for myself. So rather than comparing myself to say my sibling, my colleague, or even like a friend from university, I should just perhaps look back at my own growth. Yeah. Okay, so the next question touches a bit on forgiveness. So here's how it goes. Do we need to forgive people that are the source of our low self-esteem, especially if the person has already passed on, for example?
I think this is a very difficult question in a sense that, because there's quite a lot of points over here. So first of all, I think it will be helpful for us to acknowledge the kind of hurt that the person has caused us. That doesn't go away. To validate that our emotions and our feeling towards that person is true, is there, and that indeed that person has hurt us. And whether or not, sometimes they might say that, forgiveness might give you a lot of self-compassion and everything like that. And I'm not too sure, you might feel worse for yourself if you feel that you're not ready for it. So take it at your own pace. If you feel that you're ready to want to forgive that person, go ahead, work with a therapist, come up with an approach on how you can do that. And if you're not, it's okay. Everybody's healing process is really different. Yeah. So really listen to what you want, what you're comfortable with, and follow that path.
Yeah, thank you so much for acknowledging that. I think it is not easy, certainly, especially if we have had a difficult relationship with someone who's not already here. Okay. So the next question goes something like this. I had this client who believes he is stupid and not worth it. I tried to challenge the thought and we came to the conclusion that he is in fact low on intelligence. How do I help this client? So this involves more helping another person who has perhaps have experienced low self-esteem.
I'm so sorry. I'm not too sure. So you say, so the person is do I help the client or I help the person who asked the question? So sorry.
Okay, so this is how the question goes. I had this client who believes he's stupid and not worth it. I tried to challenge the thoughts and we came to the conclusion that he is in fact low on intelligence. How do I help this client? Yeah, so the attendee who is asked the question is more or less the one facing the situation where they are trying to talk the other person out of it. So how do they do that?
Oh, okay. So it's like, how do they do that? They are stupid and so sorry. They feel that they are not worthy and they're stupid and low on their IQ.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess that person has tried to talk to them about it, and I'm just thinking at this point at her client or his or her client has accepted that they are stupid and not worthy. Is it? But you don't see it that way. The attendee doesn't see it that way. I think this is, again, quite a lot of factors on play here. So first of all, I think the IQ, perhaps the intellectual part of it, has a part to play on our low self-esteem per se. if you have met with a block like that, I would be really interested to know like what other methods have you tried, speaking with this client over here, if in the sense that if this client, due to his lower IQ, has been through quite a bit of trauma in his life, it might make a lot of sense that at this moment, if he has just started therapy at this moment, it is really difficult for him to see beyond that. Yeah. So even though I think as you're saying the attending over here, we can see that he's not that, and we believe that he can, he deserves more, he can strive for more. We just have to understand that at this moment, the client is unable to see beyond that. And it might be a work in progress, and we have to learn to be really patient and, discover other approaches that will be really helpful with the client. Perhaps reminding ourselves to meet the clients at where they are would really be insightful over here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Fion. So this is how the next question goes. Is insecurity a byproduct of low self-esteem? First part of the question. Would you like to answer that first, or?
I would say it's quite a little bit, in a sense, insecurity. So a lot of times we don't have a lot of positive feedback about the thing we do, say insecure towards our job perhaps. So maybe we did not receive a lot of positive feedback, or maybe we lack that kind of accomplishment in that area. That's why, we don't attach a lot of value on ourselves towards work, and that really creates feelings of insecurity. Yeah.
Okay. So the second part of their question goes like this.
Yeah.
How or what can we tell ourselves to reduce falling back into this unhealthy zone? So basically tips to help them to stop falling back into low self-esteem or negative self-talk.
Oh, okay. I think, okay, so I guess I take it as this person has, already put in a lot of work, and this person has achieved a kind of a good, healthy kind of self-esteem. I'm just presuming over here, so let us know if I'm understanding you wrong over here. So I think it's very important for us to note that that it will take us to be always accessible, to be mindful, to be reflective and intentional to manage and maintain that healthy level of self-esteem. So that, next time when there's another life challenges were to happen, as they will, as life it is, that we know that we have a stronger foundation to fall back on. We know that we have the right skills. We know that we have a trusted support network to help us overcome the difficult situations again.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Just interrupting for a bit before we move on to the other questions. So just wanted to open the floor up. So if anyone would like to speak up, feel free to raise your hand. And my colleague Gowry will actually unmute you so you can actually post your questions to Fion directly. Yeah. Okay, with that, let me go to the next question. Okay, so this is how it goes. How can we healthily and respectfully tell someone that they are unfairly behaving in certain ways because of their insecurity?
I think communication skills is always one of the things we love to work in therapy. Like, how do we let others know our needs and preferences in a very respectful way? I think one very helpful thing is a soft startup. In a sense, like, I'm not too sure if you guys have heard, but using I statement. So for example, I feel really troubled, or I feel really upset that you're doing something. And we describe, that situation in a very factual manner. So instead of coming and saying, you make me really unhappy because you did this, it can come across as very offensive. And naturally, the person hearing that will feel very attacked, and they will be out on their defense, and most probably that conversation will not be very helpful to get things done, to get things resolved. Instead, using I statement, letting that person know his actions, or his or her actions, or what they have done is affecting you. I think that will be quite helpful. That will bring down their defenses, so they are more willing to listen, and then follow up by a positive need. what would you need that person to do for you? Say, for example, I'm feeling really upset because you did this. It makes me feel really uncomfortable. I need you to bring it down a notch or two. Do you think you'll be able to do that? So quite a bit of times talking like that, having conversations like that could make the person more willing to listen, and hopefully you can manage to resolve some of your conflicts.
Yeah, that's really interesting because we tend to just most of the time in the form of self-defense, we might go like, you did this, you did that, rather than you know going with I statements and telling other people how we feel. Yeah, so that's a good first step to start acknowledging. Okay, so the next question we have is something that goes like this. What should we do if we realize we are in a toxic work environment, especially if it's a super small team of 3 to 4 people and we are required to travel for work frequently?
Okay, so I guess you're saying that you have to spend quite a bit of time with the team of people.
Yeah.
So I guess you first have to identify. So first, perhaps we have to understand: is it everyone in the team that is bringing out that that negative, toxic kind of feeling in the environment? So that's one. Or is that really only just that person that's introducing all this very negative and very pulling you down kind of feeling? All right. So if it is like the whole team, perhaps you like to reevaluate again your relationship with them. Okay. So say you want to keep that job. So we understand what kind of parameters we are working with. Due to financial, it's such a good job. I can learn a lot of things. You want to keep that job. So how do we? You have to think of ways. How do you keep your distance from all this quite toxic or quite negative colleagues? And that's where setting your boundaries come in again. Yeah, so if that's only like perhaps only that one person you identify, seeking a second opinion from a trusted person could help you develop a more, again, balanced view on the situation, on that person, before you decide to take any action from there.
Yeah, okay. So the person actually had a follow-up question that goes with it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask if it's better to walk away, look for a new job if that's a better option, or better to, focus on their mental health and career. So basically they are weighing between mental health and career, which is honestly some of the struggle that we all face, right?
Yeah, definitely. That is for sure. I mean, if you have been entertaining these thoughts for a while, I'm not too sure, have you talked to somebody about it? So again, to give ourselves a more balanced view, so that our decision is more like calibrated instead of being reactive. And if you feel that you have been thinking through it very, very objectively, and you feel that with your skills, with the experience that you have, it is not a problem to move to a next role, and I would say go for it. But if it's something that arises when you are having a very, very difficult time at work, or when you have seek for opinions and everyone might be saying different things, perhaps you might like to maybe seek an expert opinion, like work with a therapist, talk to a trusted, like say ex-boss, gather their opinions, interact with your own opinions to see what you want, and then you make your decision.
Okay, thank you for those actionable steps. So there are a few more minutes left, so I'll take a few more questions. And this one is something that I find really interesting personally. So here is how it goes. Is it true that you need to love yourself first before loving others?
I'm not too sure. Okay, so I guess you are in the sense, you're saying in the sense that if you do not love yourself, you will find it hard to love others. Could be, in the sense that, if I were to give you a scenario, for example, like somebody is kind of triggering you, and you feel that you do not have the patience or empathy for that person. So does it mean that you don't love that person? Or perhaps it could be like, growing up, nobody held that space for you, for your emotions, when you are, having a difficult time, when you are, say, throwing tantrums, or you're being angry or being upset, nobody held that space for you. And then you don't learn how to do that. And now when you're faced with a situation, you do not have the adequate skills, you do not have the understanding to do that for the person. And perhaps it's not really so much about loving yourself first. I think that's part of the equation. Yeah. Learning self-compassion, so to love ourselves, that's one. And also to understand, to make sense of, our past experiences, that to give us more insight, to give us more understanding to how we can better do it. So some empathy over there as well. So new insights over there as well. So it's really self-compassion, quite a bit of empathy towards yourself, understanding the impact of your past experiences on you and your behavior. I think that could be maybe a more well-rounded approach to your questions in that sense. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question could probably help us understand the ways to seek support better if we are facing issues with low self-esteem. So this is how it goes. What are the best types of therapy to work on those traumas that affect self-esteem?
Okay, so trauma, I think it's always helpful to work with a trauma-informed therapist. Yeah, so they will be trained in a way to really support you better, to validate your emotions. So if we are talking about trauma in this sense, that very, very low self-esteem, it's really difficult for them to see outside what they are experiencing right now. So there are so many times that they will be triggered and they will be thrown back, back to their childhood or thrown back to past experiences. And they are literally reliving that trauma again. So that's very, very tough. So I think the first step would be to find a therapist who's trained in trauma-informed therapy. And that would be really helpful for them to start.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I think we have a bit of time for one last question, if you don't mind. This one can probably give everyone here a starting step as to how we can better cope with our sense of self. So here it goes. Any journaling prompts or mantra for increasing self-esteem?
Okay. I think increasing self and mantra in a sense. I think I think using a yes but statement is always very helpful. Like yes but statements in a sense that it helps us take accountability to acknowledge that we have, so that we don't all go into positive, psychology or positive affirmation or just purely positive, because too much of it is also unrealistic. So using yes but statements kind of grounds us a little bit, so it becomes more realistic. Us taking accountability and responsibility on things that we are not doing well. And so that would be an area of improvement, but at the same time also acknowledging and identifying that the areas that we have to do well. So that will give us a very balanced view on the person that we are.
I think Fion froze
and not impacting on ourselves. Colleague A again. So yes, colleague A has been doing really, really, really well, but I have also made all these kind of contributions, but I managed to score a project, but I have been complimented by bosses before. Yeah, so this is kind of a more neutral and more realistic kind of statements that you might consider, if you're journaling.
Okay, thank you so much. And so sorry, because we are a little tight on time, I think that will be the last question that we will be taking for now. So no worries, for the rest of the questions that we have received, we will try to definitely put up content that are relevant to the topic itself and try to address them separately. And so sorry that we couldn't get to all of them within the hour. Okay, so Gowry, if I could have the slides back up. Yeah, so with that, we've come to the end of this evening's AMA. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining our first webinar and for submitting your questions. As I said, really sorry we couldn't get to them, but we'll, in some form or another, try to get them down, as well as put up content that are relevant to the topic. Yeah, so we hope you have learned a thing or two about self-esteem from Fion, and perhaps even understood yourself a little better. Now it's our turn to hear from you. So please fill out the feedback form by scanning this QR code or by clicking the link in the chat. So feel free to let us know how you found today's session and how we can further improve future ones. Yeah. Okay, so the next QR code over here, it's for you to leave us any topic ideas on what we can cover next. So feel free to leave your suggestions on our community page. Once again, we are really happy to have you here, and thank you so much for spending an hour of your day with us. Or maybe it's nighttime, as it is for us here in Singapore. So we hope to see you at our next one. And that's all I have.
Thank you everyone again.
Bye. Thank you so much.